China has quietly seized the upper hand in a trade war the United States believed it was winning. When U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent demanded that Beijing halt its use of currency manipulation, he likely did not anticipate that it would be the dollar, not the yuan, that would falter. Since January 2025, the U.S. dollar index has plunged nearly 10%, a move intended to stimulate exports and revitalize domestic manufacturing. But rather than fueling a production boom, the weaker dollar has triggered inflationary pressures across supply chains still heavily reliant on Chinese components. At the same time, U.S. tariffs, some reaching 145% on core goods such as electronics, textiles, and auto parts, have throttled imports. Washington's goal was to force China to turn inward, but the unintended consequence has been a self-inflicted chokehold on American industry. Intermediate goods are harder to source, domestic alternatives aren't ready, and as a result, input costs are soaring. According to UBS, landed costs for consumer electronics have jumped 32% year over year, while furniture imports have risen 45%. March 2025 saw a 1.1% spike in core goods inflation, the highest monthly increase in 4 years, driven largely by broken supply routes and high import prices. Despite these conditions, China's yuan has remained stable, depreciating just 3.2% over the same period, a stark contrast to the 14.5% devaluation seen during the 2018 trade war. That stability isn't accidental. It's part of a deliberate strategy. Beijing has kept the yuan within a tight trading band while its central bank, the People's Bank of China, cut its one-year loan prime rate to 3.35% in March, stimulating domestic demand without currency volatility. This stability, combined with strategic monetary injections, more than $210 billion into state-owned banks, has strengthened China's economic posture, even as the US dollar declines. The markets are responding decisively. Net short positions against the dollar totaled $17.2 billion in April, up from $9.8 billion in January, according to CFTC data. This isn't merely speculative activity. It's a reflection of diminishing global confidence in U.S. policy coherence. Bloomberg's dollar index shows the greenback weakening against most major currencies, while the yield gap between 10-year U.S. Treasuries and Chinese government bonds has narrowed to just 32 basis points, its tightest level since 2006. The traditional incentives to hold U.S. assets are eroding. American manufacturing isn't ready for this pivot. The Federal Reserve's March industrial production report revealed a 0.6% monthly contraction, with capacity utilization falling to 76.8%. Reshoring efforts remain years behind expectations. The labor market, meanwhile, isn't filling the gap. Manufacturing job openings dropped 17% year over year as of February, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Construction materials and machinery, much of which still comes from China, have become significantly more expensive, contributing to a 1.3% increase in core producer prices during Q1. The promise that a weaker dollar would boost domestic industry is unraveling under the weight of underprepared infrastructure and input scarcity. In parallel, U.S. retailers are facing a crisis. Shipping volumes from China to major U.S. ports, including Los Angeles and Long Beach, have dropped by 61%, according to logistics firms Flexport and Panga. The National Retail Federation has warned that inventory at major chains like Walmart and Target could reach critical levels within 5 to 7 weeks, unless trade normalizes. Tariffs, not foreign policy wins, are driving the supply crunch. Amid these economic tremors, Washington has leaned on its allies, urging them to join in isolating Beijing. But the pressure isn't working, especially in London. In April, former White House advisor Peter Navarro labeled the UK a compliant servant of Communist China in The Telegraph, reflecting growing U.S. frustration. Behind the scenes, Washington has been lobbying London to block imports that have been rerouted from the U.S. market. However, the numbers show that the UK, while cautious, is choosing pragmatism. China made up 7.3% of UK imports in 2023, providing vital goods for electric vehicles, pharmaceuticals, and telecoms. These are not sectors with easy substitutes, especially within the EU. Chancellor Rachel Reeves dismissed calls for decoupling, stating that disengaging from the world's second-largest economy would be very foolish. Meanwhile, the London Stock Exchange is actively reviewing Shein's IPO, despite bipartisan concerns in Parliament. Leaked cabinet briefings reported by The Guardian reveal strong internal resistance to U.S. pressure, with one senior official calling Washington's strategy economically self-destructive. UK policymakers are navigating a middle path, calculated independence rather than compliance. Even as Navarro accused Beijing of trying to suck the UK dry, Data from the Rhodium Group showed that Chinese FDI into Britain actually fell 27% in 2024. Moreover, British regulators have blocked Chinese firms from critical infrastructure projects, including Huawei's exclusion from the UK's 5G network, a decision guided by MI5. The rhetoric from Washington paints a picture of subservience, but the UK's response has been strategic, not submissive. As Fiona Hill, former US National Security Council advisor, noted, the real danger is mistaking inflammatory language for accurate policy analysis. Trump, under mounting political pressure, is working to reframe the situation as a victory. But Q1 GDP contracted by 0.3% and real wages declined 1.1%. Simultaneously, Xi Jinping is managing his own problems. Youth unemployment is at 5.3%, and housing starts have fallen 22% year over year. Both leaders are engaged in a delicate balancing act, projecting strength abroad while maintaining control at home. This is no longer simply a question of economic competition, it's a test of political survival. Foreign policy has become domestic optics. Diplomatically, both sides are signaling openness to talks, yet neither appears willing to move first. This ambiguity is not a failure but a strategy. Known as constructive ambiguity, it's a tool borrowed from Cold War-era arms negotiations, allowing each side to save face while feeling out the other's position. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce has said it is evaluating negotiations, while US Treasury officials have indicated the door remains open. A state-linked Weibo account stated bluntly, the US must be the more anxious party. It's a sentiment that reflects how power has shifted, not overtly, but incrementally and deliberately. The reality is that this conflict has outgrown its bilateral framework. According to WTO data, China's exports to BRICS nations grew 19.4% in Q1 2025, while exports to the US dropped 31.7%. The EU, meanwhile, has increased internal trade by 12%, buffering against volatility. The UK is balancing two sets of trade talks, one with Trump's administration focused on agricultural concessions, the other with Brussels, aimed at preserving frictionless EU access. This isn't just a trade war anymore. It's a stress test for globalization. As Columbia University's Adam Tooze observed, we are entering a phase of economic realignment, not ideological decoupling. Nations are repricing their alliances based on inflation rates, labor availability, and shipping lanes, not declarations from Washington or Beijing. The old center of gravity is weakening. What replaces it might not be a new singular power, but a sprawling, tangled web of transactional relationships. So the question now is not just about who wins the trade war, but about who defines the rules of global trade going forward. Are we witnessing the start of a multipolar economic order, or simply a turbulent chapter in a long-term rivalry? Who truly holds the power in shaping the next decade, governments or investors? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe.